It's very concerning to our commercial poultry community. I don't know if many of you have heard about this or not, but Tyson is actually closing two of the complexes, one in Virginia and one in Arkansas.
Tyson Foods is closing 4 more chicken plants, and that's after already shutting down chicken facilities in May and laying off 1,700 workers.
In recent months, the American economy has seen a series of events that reflect deeper issues within corporate decision-making, labor policy, and international trade. Tyson Foods, one of the United States' largest meat processing companies, has closed 8 plants across the country, affecting nearly 3,000 workers. These closures have impacted towns in Arkansas, Indiana, Missouri, Kansas, and Pennsylvania, leaving behind shuttered facilities, laid-off workers, and local businesses struggling to survive. While Tyson has labeled the move as part of a strategy to optimize operations, the consequences are far-reaching and cannot be overlooked. The decisions made by Tyson are not isolated. Incidents, they reflect a broader trend in American industry, where economic pressures, rising costs, and global uncertainty lead to restructuring and consolidation. Tyson's leadership stated that the plant closures were driven by the need to modernize and streamline operations, focusing resources on newer and more cost-efficient facilities. However, many of these decisions came with little warning. In places like North Little Rock, Arkansas, and Corydon, Indiana, hundreds of employees were informed of their plant's shutdown with minimal time to prepare for unemployment, creating significant upheaval for working families. In Perry, Iowa, one of the largest Tyson closures affected nearly 1,300 workers, many of whom were immigrants. For these individuals, their jobs weren't just paychecks, they were lifelines. They supported children, paid mortgages, and kept small businesses alive in the community. The closure didn't only affect the workers inside the plant, it sent shockwaves through the entire local economy. Restaurants, gas stations, laundromats, and daycare centers began reporting sharp drops in revenue, many seeing losses of 40% or more. Some closed down entirely within weeks. These towns had built their economic foundation around Tyson's presence, and when the company left, that foundation began to crack. One key factor behind Tyson's shift is the rising cost of production. Feed, freight, and logistics have all grown more expensive in the wake of global supply chain disruptions, inflation, and tariff policies introduced in recent years. Trade tariffs imposed on imported steel, aluminum, and agricultural goods were designed to make American-made products more competitive by increasing the cost of foreign imports. However, they've also raised the cost of critical raw materials for domestic producers. Companies like Tyson, which rely on vast quantities of feed and packaging, have been squeezed by these higher input costs. Instead of expanding operations within the U.S., the economic pressure has led them to downsize, consolidate, or move capacity to lower-cost areas. Even with these challenges, Tyson has received considerable support from the U.S. government. Reports show the company benefited from more than $250 million in direct agricultural subsidies, and billions more through broader USDA supply chain programs. Despite this, it chose to shut down facilities without relocating those jobs to equivalent plants within the United States. While cost efficiency is a valid business goal, this raises important questions about accountability, especially when public funds are involved. Tyson's CEO, Donnie King, received compensation worth approximately $12 million in 2024 alone, according to financial filings. This figure includes base salary, bonuses, and stock options. Meanwhile, thousands of frontline workers faced sudden layoffs. At a time when communities were looking for stability and answers, many felt abandoned. Critics argue that such executive payouts in the middle of massive job losses are emblematic of a growing disconnect between corporate leadership and working-class Americans. On a national level, the story of Tyson is deeply intertwined with larger trade and economic policy. The use of high tariffs was intended to encourage companies to move operations back to the U.S. In theory, this protectionist approach would drive domestic manufacturing growth. But in practice, the outcomes have been more mixed. According to a 2019 Federal Reserve study, tariffs on steel and aluminum led to a net loss in U.S. manufacturing jobs. Input costs rose, and industries that rely on these materials had to scale back. In many cases, the result was not a wave of new American jobs, but rather higher prices, reduced production, and job losses in traditional manufacturing towns. As Tyson shut down facilities, other industries were also feeling the pressure. In the aviation sector, for example, Boeing experienced a significant setback when China halted deliveries of the 737 MAX-10 aircraft previously slated for numerous Chinese airlines. The move came in response to U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods and added another layer of uncertainty to an already volatile trade environment. The broader consequences of these trade tensions included delays, lost contracts, and disruptions across aerospace, agriculture, and manufacturing. The impact on farmers was also significant. Many poultry growers had contracts with Tyson to supply birds to local processing plants. When those plants closed, the contracts were terminated. Left with flocks and no buyers, many farmers had no choice but to sell off equipment, cull birds, or default on loans. Some lost their farms entirely. According to investigations from agricultural media, dozens of family farms in Missouri and Arkansas were either foreclosed on or went bankrupt after their Tyson contracts ended with little notice. Meanwhile, public programs that rely on affordable domestic food supplies were strained. The USDA's Farm-to-School program, which helps schools buy fresh, local food was hit with funding cuts just months before Tyson's closures. As ingredient prices rose and availability dropped, many school districts were forced to shrink meal sizes or raise prices. The burden of these decisions fell on working families and children. What's happening at Tyson is part of a larger pattern. When corporations restructure to maintain profitability, and when trade policies are introduced without targeted support for workers, the result is often the same: closures, layoffs, and struggling communities. The idea that high tariffs would bring jobs home sounds appealing in theory, but without careful planning and industry coordination, those policies can drive companies to reduce U.S. operations instead of expanding them. Corporate restructuring is not inherently negative. Companies must adapt to survive. But the way it is carried out matters. Workers deserve fair notice, opportunities for retraining, and support systems that help them transition to new employment. Community investments should be part of the conversation when companies benefit from public subsidies. Economic policy should consider not just global competition, but local consequences. The dream of revitalizing American manufacturing is still possible, but it requires more than blanket tariffs or hopeful slogans. It demands coordinated investment in workforce development, infrastructure, and education. It requires transparency and accountability from companies that accept public support. Most of all, it requires policies that prioritize people workers, families, and communities, not just the bottom line. In small towns across America, the story is the same. Factories once filled with the hum of production now sit quiet. Communities that grew around these plants are trying to adjust. Families are looking for work, students are dealing with school budget cuts, and small businesses are wondering if they'll survive the next wave of closures. The road to recovery will take time, and it will take commitment from both public and private sectors. Tyson Foods is just one chapter in a larger story about trade, industry, and economic transformation. As the country navigates these challenges, it's critical that we ask tough questions. Are our current trade policies creating the outcomes we want? Are subsidies being used to support growth, or just to cushion restructuring? Are workers being given the tools they need to succeed in a changing economy? The answers to these questions will shape the future of American labor and industry. The choices we make today will determine whether slogans like "Bring jobs home" become a reality or just another broken promise.